Welcome to Vendetta Sports Media. This is Eight Sided Freaks. Today we have another episode that is kind of centered around fight nights. We do have a paper review to preview next week. So this is the last week of the fight night grind per se. This week we have UFC Seattle in the review mirror, which ended up being a solid fight night card. And then we have UFC Vegas 102 next week, which is a solid main event and then kind of falls apart and has some random things that are worth looking forward to. And it's kind of a weird card, in all honesty, outside of the main event. And so we're going to touch on those two things. And then afterwards, we're going to hit on some news. We'll talk about Dan Hooker pulling out of the Justin Gaethje fight, talk about the replacement, potential replacements that we'd like to see step in and fight Gaethje. And then we'll talk about a couple other fight bookings that took place within the last week. So that is the docket for today. And we'll start with the recap of UFC Seattle. And we will start right at the main event, Henry Cejudo versus Song Yadong. This one ends in a weird fashion. So just to summarize for those who did not watch the fight or completely didn't understand the situation, because I know I had a couple of my friends who watch UFC pretty regularly who didn't know what was going on. So for anyone listening who still is slightly confused, I can break it down the best of my abilities. So basically, UFC Seattle, we had Song Yadong land an eye poke on Henry Cejudo in the third round. Pretty bad. Henry takes the full 5 minutes to recover, which is fairly rare. At the end of the 5 minutes, he opts to continue fighting. He is pretty visibly, not fighting back. He's kind of running. And in the corner after round 3, he says he can't see. So they stopped the fight. I think it was technically went down as like the doctor stepping in to say he couldn't fight is how it technically went down. And then they were able to go to a technical decision since more than half of the rounds were completed. So they were able to go to a technical decision, tally up the scorecards up to that point. So they had 3 full rounds to score. And then of those 3 rounds that were scored, Song Yadong won 2 of the 3 on 2 judges' scorecards and 3 of the 3 on 1 judge's scorecard. So he walks out with the decision victory. If Henry Cejudo would have stopped fighting at the initial stoppage and not waited till the end of the 3rd round, could have been ruled a no contest, but that is not what went down. So for anyone who was confused about that, that was kind of the breakdown of the main event from a rules perspective. Now, before we give our thoughts on that, because I do want to get you guys' opinions on Cejudo stopping after the 3rd round, I first want to get your guys' opinion on how you thought the fight was going prior to the eye pokes. Jerry, we can swing it over to you first. What did you make of that matchup from what we saw? We got about 2 full rounds and probably about 3.5 minutes of the 3rd round before the eye poke.
Yeah, this was a weird one because obviously like the eye poke and the fight getting stopped early, but it did seem like Song Yadong was kind of starting to pull away a little bit. Henry Cejudo tried his takedowns, couldn't land any of those. Song Yadong was kind of piecing him up a bit on the feet, and I mean, this is one of those ones that it led to a weird exchange that ended with the eye poke. But it's one that it's hard to really tell. I know they were talking about a potential rematch of this. I'm not completely opposed to that. But at the same time, in my opinion, Song Yadong was up 3-0 at that time. May have lost one of the rounds, but I thought he kind of looked better and did more of what he had to do against Cejudo, who I've also seen now that he's potentially moving back down to 125. But.
Yeah, I agree. I think I had it 3-0 as well. Maybe it could have been 2-1, but regardless, I was thinking Song was pretty certain he was going to win that fight too, say without the eye poke, if he'd even win all 5 rounds. But I had him up 3. I know Cejudo had that leg kick, I think in the first, where Song reacted weird, which is always a little scary when it comes to with lower bodies and stuff. But besides that, Cejudo kept landing to that leg too, and Song didn't really react like that ever again. So without that being like maybe the one thing Cejudo had going for him was, I guess, targeting that one leg. Everything else I thought was favoring Song. I thought Song is, stuffing those takedowns, which is really impressive. He continues to do that in a lot of fights. Not stuff everyone, but he continues to show great takedown defense in all these fights. And then I thought his striking was better, especially going from that second to that third round. I thought he was starting to land more often, and then he was kind of Cejudo's big swings and overhands and was starting to land even less. So I just think that fight, as it went on further, was going to continue to favor Song Yadong. So I thought he looked really good in the, kind of like James said, the 2.5 rounds, I guess, that we got.
Yeah, I think it was a really interesting fight, and I think I was higher on Cejudo's performance than most people. Certainly a little bit higher than both of you guys, from what it sounds like. And I don't know if that comes from his actual performance or if that comes from me not thinking he was going to have a ton of striking success prior to the fight. So the striking success he did have, I was impressed with because I didn't think we were going to see any of it. I thought he landed some really good shots. They were trading leg kicks a lot. Cejudo did better defending the leg kicks than I thought he was going to based on some previous fights. I thought he was really going to get chewed up to the legs if it went there, and he tracked a couple of leg kicks and landed some of his own. The boxing wasn't a complete wash, although I do agree with you guys that Song was ahead. I wasn't actively scoring the fight as it went on, so I mean, I don't really know if I had 3-0 Cejudo or 2-1, or excuse me, 3-0 Song or 2-1 Song. I kind of thought they were a little bit closer rounds, but I didn't think it was a terrible performance from Cejudo. I was also impressed that he didn't really show very many signs of fatigue in that third round, and I think they're pushing the pace, and I think that fight was really starting to turn up and was going to be going to kind of turn into a shootout there. And I think round 3 was probably the most entertaining of the first 3 rounds prior to the eye poke, and so I think that fight was trending towards being something very entertaining, and we didn't quite get to see it. With all that being said, I do agree with you guys that I had Song up to that point. And, the way the fight is scored, like the minute and a half that were after the eye poke, that counts on the scorecards as well when you're scoring that third round. And that was Song marching Cejudo down, throwing big shots. So I do think it was a great performance as well from Song. I don't want to gloss it over too much because he's going out there with Henry Cejudo defending takedowns and landing shots is not an easy feat. So I do want to acknowledge that as well. So impressed with both performances here, and I thought it was a pretty good fight. And to kind of swing it back to the eye poke, I saw a lot of people thinking Henry quit and that he was trying to play games with the decision, that he wanted to get a point taken and try and get it to the scorecards after the third round. And, if they take a point and then it goes to the scorecards, now we're looking at a draw. What do you guys make of Cejudo's the way that he went out in this one? And what do you make of the point not being taken? Because I know that was another point of controversy. So what do you guys make of those two areas of this fight? Anthony, you can lead us off on this one.
I thought the whole situation was just a bit weird. Kind of like you said earlier, he took the full 5 minutes, which you shouldn't fault someone for that. Maybe more people technically should take the full minutes when they get time allotted to them, whether that be because also when someone gets hit in the groin and they take a long time, no one ever says anything because it's like, oh, understandable. But I mean, eye poke same way, especially if it's affecting your vision. I just think it was. I don't know. He just had such different mannerisms to other people that get poked in the eye, whether that be the constant like blinking and all that stuff. He like seemed perfectly fine with the eye poke. But yeah, it was just waiting. And then I remember the whole thing of he even, finished that round. And then when he's on the stool, all of a sudden he's saying, I can't see. Or also when he was waiting, the thing that I just thought was a little funny was when he's, taking his 5 minutes and he's like, yeah, how much time's left in the round and stuff like that. And it's like, that's maybe an interesting question to ask when, you've eye poked and you're supposedly can't see. But at the same time, This dude is what, like I think we said it last podcast, arguably the most decorated combat athlete of all time. So I'm gonna go ahead and say he's gonna be looking for a way out. I think as himself, as the person, as a competitor, as an athlete throughout his whole career has probably showed that he's more game than a lot of people when it comes to fighting, and he truly is a competitor. So I think it would be um, kind of wrong of me sitting on a couch watching that to be like, oh, he's like trying to take the easy way out. So I just think the whole situation was a bit unfortunate and a bit odd the way things were being handled. But if you can't see, I'm not going to ask a professional athlete to get attacked by someone for 10 more minutes, possibly, if he can't see out of of his left eye or something. So I think it was justified the way things played out, because I think I saw the next day he said he really couldn't see. There was like a scratch on a cornea or something. He tweeted something, but yeah, I just think unfortunately it played out a little bit more awkward than we see other eye pokes play out. But to be fair, they never play out the same anytime. It usually ends with an immediate fight stoppage. So
Yeah, no, I agree with a lot of what you're saying. As far as like he's done so much in the sport, so much in combat sports that there's, in my opinion, I don't think he's quitting. Could it have been handled a little bit better? Definitely. But sorry, guys, kind of getting over something at the moment. But
All good.
no, it's one of those things. I think he realized he was losing the fight, and maybe this was I'm not going to risk getting seriously damaged and seriously hurt by going out there and forcing myself, even when I can't see. But I did find it weird that it was like he took 5 minutes and it was like, let's see what I can do. And maybe he thought he'd be okay, and then got rocked a couple times and kind of just call it there before anything major happens.
Yeah. So I agree with a lot of what you guys said, and I really echo the sentiment of, this is a guy who is a decorated athlete, um, Olympic gold medalist. Like, we've seen him in the UFC come back from serious adversity. The Marlon Moraes fight, he was getting kicked of all hell, and his legs are all beat up, and he bit down on the mouthpiece and made it a dogfight and won. So we've seen him not only not quit, but do the opposite of like quitting is like when things get tough. He bit down on the mouthpiece and was like, all right, this is going to be tough. It's going to be a dogfight. I'm going to tough my way through this. And he's found success doing that. So he's done, the polar opposite of quitting throughout his career. So historically, I give him leeway. And I also think that if he was trying to, scam a win or find a way out, it's a lot easier to say that you can't see during the initial stoppage because you either get the no contest or you get the DQ. When he starts fighting again, it takes the DQ kind of off of the cards. It at least makes it a lot harder to enforce a DQ at that point. So I think it's very hard to say that he's trying to scam out the technical decision win when, if he quits, when they first stop it, there's a chance that it's a DQ and then he gets a win that way. So that didn't really make sense to me. I do think it was an awkward stoppage. I don't think he wanted to continue fighting, and I don't know if that means he necessarily quit, but I think he understood that you can't see it. He couldn't see out of one of his eyes. He tried to fight through it, and then unfortunately, since he went to fight through it, that's how he found out he shouldn't have been fighting. He probably didn't realize that he shouldn't have been fighting until after he started fighting again, and Song started throwing shots at him and started walking him down, and he couldn't see the shots coming. And I think his reaction in the corner was trying to get his corner to come in and stop it. I think a lot of fighters when they don't want to be in there, I don't think they want to say, I don't want to be in here anymore. I think they want the corner to step in and say, that's enough. We got to stop this. We've seen that happen a lot with broken hands. Anthony Pettis versus Tony Ferguson. When Pettis breaks his hand, he tells his corner, hey, my hand's broken. He didn't say, my hand's broken. Will you please stop it? But he says, hey, guys, my hand's broken. And then they go out there and stop it. Same with Kevin Holland versus Wonderboy. hey, my hand's broken, and the corner says, all right, we're going to stop it. That's the way a lot of these go, and I think that's kind of what Henry was going for. I do think it's awkward, and I do think it's unnatural, and I don't think it's going to be commonplace in the future, but I don't think he was trying to quit because he didn't want to be in there. I think he recognized that he couldn't see out of one eye and understood the disadvantage that put him in and the potential danger that puts him in. So that's kind of my take on it, but I don't think he was in a great place from a health perspective there. So I think it was the only thing that I would have changed is just not going out there for the last minute. Just call it when you can't see with the original stoppage. That's the only thing I would like to see done differently.
And I think it probably would have been a no contest if he didn't go back out there. The only thing I say, I don't think it should have been a DQ. I know people were saying that because the first strike was a groin strike, wasn't it? And then it happened to be IPA. And then the first 2 rounds were clean, right? They both kind of just snowballed in that third. So I didn't think it was definitely didn't merit like a DQ. However, hilarious as soon as he comes back. Song Yadong just fingers out. Yeah, like this. I was like, oh my God. He's like taunting him.
Yeah.
It's like dude's trying to give him PTSD. So I just thought that was weird. But like to finish too low, like you said, I do think I was super impressed by the fight. I was having fun with the rounds we were getting. I did like what I was seeing from Cejudo. But to the conversation of the immediate rematch, I personally wouldn't want to see that necessarily. Not that it isn't justified. Like I said, the fight was fun, but I don't know. Song Yadong keeps losing these title elimination fights in a sense, and I don't know when the next fight would even be booked. But now you're going to kind of make him fight a 38-year-old when he's arguably like your youngest prospect too. That's in the mix of all those. I just personally would want to see. I thought those 2.5 rounds showed me enough that he's still really good, obviously, and that's a good name. And it showed for Cejudo as well. Cejudo was hanging with a striker that he probably was supposed to be losing more of those exchanges. So I thought that fight. It's unfortunate the way it played out, but I thought that fight kind of showed enough for both guys, and I wouldn't mind a switch up moving forward.
Yeah, I'm with you. And like, as far as Song Yadong goes, the last 2 guys he lost to, Cory Sandhagen, who we've all talked could potentially be a champion down the road or at least fight for a belt, and Petr Yan, who we've all talked about as the champion and as one of the most dangerous guys in this division. Those are not bad losses. You can't discredit him for that. And I do think maybe third time's a charm. I wouldn't mind seeing him the way he so successfully defended all those takedowns. I think Umar Nurmagomedov would be an intriguing fight just because Umar, we saw what happened against Merab. I think this is an opportunity for him to go against a striker, not a guy who had the gas tank and the takedown defense and capabilities of Merab. So that's one where I think it works out for both guys. As far as just the rest of that fight went, I thought it was really funny. And I can't remember if it was Bisping or Shara Bullet, but they tweeted something out after like, hey, fighting with one eye's never stopped us before. Me before. I think it was one of the 2 of them tweeted something about that, which it's entertaining.
Yeah, as far as future bookings go, I wouldn't hate seeing the rematch, but I also understand, we have plenty of fun matchups here to the point where we don't necessarily have to run this one back. I do like the Song Yadong and Umar Nurmagomedov shout. I think that is a solid fight and a good test for Umar. And then we have Cory Sandhagen and Deiveson Figueiredo booked, which we're going to talk about later. And otherwise, I would have said Henry Cejudo versus Jose Aldo, I think would have made a lot of sense. But we're seeing Aldo's another guy we're going to talk about later as far as they've got him a matchup in the top 15. So he's booked. And to me, that kind of leaves Rob Font, who also fought on this card, as a decent matchup for Cejudo moving forward. That's not a bad fight at all, considering the guys that we have booked or unavailable in this top 15.
I liked all those. I think, although, which I don't know if we'll talk about it too. I thought that Rob Font fight was a pretty good fight throughout too. But Cejudo, I don't know the other guys, his exact wrestling pedigree, but there's a chance Cejudo just ragdolls Rob Font for 15 minutes. But that's, 38 years old. That's if the wrestling's still at that, uber elite level, but we'll see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Cejudo I feel like is a little harder because Song Yadong can kind of just move up, or maybe like Chito Vera if he's fighting someone around his ranking. That for Henry Cejudo, also the question comes up. He's lost 3 straight. It was out, I think, is what? Petr Yan and Aljamain Sterling, and now this one is Song Yadong. How much longer?
It was Aljamain, Merab, and then
Merab. That's right. Yeah, I forgot about the Merab one. But how much longer do you think he really has left? We know he took 3 years off, comes back, and immediately loses 3 straight decisions.
He said he thinks he has 1. Okay. And he also said he doesn't know what the UFC's opinion of him is at the moment. So those are 2 kind of like, he thinks he has 1 more. He doesn't even know if the UFC wants to see him fight again. Like, I don't really see why not. If you're really that pissed at Henry, like, you don't want to see him fight. Like, to me, that's like the most obvious, like, oh, we're going to screw him with a good prospect on his way out the door, like they do with everybody if they're really that upset with him. I don't know why they would turn him down a fight. I just feel like he's still bringing in eyes, and, he passes the eye test as far as skills go.
Yeah, they've let other people fight a lot longer with less skills than Cejudo. Also, aren't they mad at him? What? Because he wanted more money for flyweights and stuff, though. Like
something like that.
Because he took years off because flyweights were getting disrespect. Well, they almost folded that weight class too. So, but I don't know. A fighter asking for more money. So yeah, good way to get on the UFC and Dana's bad side. It's terrible.
I will say another guy that I just want to throw out there is you, because James, you brought up the idea of him fighting an up-and-coming prospect if the UFC wants him to just get out. What if he does move down to 125 and fights a guy? I think Joshua Van has a fight coming up, but he's been running through some fools recently, so maybe something like that, or Bruno Silva, some of those at the lower division.
Yeah, those are some wild ones, but I'd say yes to Josh Van versus Henry Cejudo.
I think that'd build the name too, for sure.
Yeah. All right, let's jump down to this co-main event because this was a pretty high-profile co-main event. We had Anthony Fluffy Hernandez versus Brendan Allen. I honestly don't know how the first round was scored, but it was the round that Brendan Allen had the most success. He, landed some decent shots on the feet, landed a head kick. Did this weird, land a head kick, almost jump onto the back. But Hernandez still, ended up getting to top position from that and held top position until Allen got on top, landed an elbow that cut Fluffy open. And then rounds 2 and 3 were much more one-sided towards Fluffy. Landed takedowns, spending time on top, got some more ground and pound off. Tried to work some submissions, notably threatened some rear naked chokes. Nothing too serious, I don't believe, off the top of my head. There weren't really any moments in there where I was like, oh my God, Fluffy's going to get the stoppage. But yeah, so Fluffy Hernandez, clean decision win against Brendan Allen. What did you guys make of Fluffy's performance out there? Jerry, it is your turn to lead us off here.
I mean, like you said, that first round was 50-50. You could have really gone either way because Fluffy got the takedown, but was kind of outstruck significantly on the feet and just in general by Brendan Allen. I think he did enough the next 2 rounds to win, and I think he was the much better fighter, and he was landing takedowns in the seconds and the third rounds, was getting more progressively moving forward, more aggressive on the feet. He outstruck him by 20 in the third round, outstruck him by 19 in the second round. So there's one where he did look good. It's just when he did get him down on the ground, as in Fluffy getting Brendan Allen on the ground, he wasn't doing a whole lot with it. He got the one takedown in the second and almost got submitted. I don't think he was really in that much danger, but Brendan Allen actually attempted one. So no, I think there's still stuff he needs to work on if he's going to move up to a champion, because I don't think he can ride out with this ground game. Not that it's bad by any means, but I think he needs to put people away once he gets them on the ground at the higher level and with the guys who are ahead of him in the rankings. Because, I mean, you look at it, it's like a Jared Cannonier is getting older, but you have Hamzat, Adresius Duplessis, Borjalo, even like Izzy at times and Robert Whittaker might be able to get up if you're not going to submit him on the ground.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of the only thing I didn't like. Great performance, pretty clean win. Because even that first round was one sided until then it flipped like completely like halfway through the round, and then Allen had his own success, ended up on top and stuff, and did more ground and pound too. But that was my biggest problem was that it's not that it wasn't like a lack of inactivity, but a lack of like significant uh, maybe strikes that were happening in the ground and pound or significant submission attempts like that could actually be close to finishing the fight. But I mean, besides that, the wrestling still worked against another dude that can, grapple a little bit. There's some fun transitions and exchanges on the ground as well, and he was still, for the most part, winning most of them, having a lot of control time. For someone that was on that 5-fight like finishing streak, you would like to see. It probably wasn't going to happen on the feet, but you would like to see like a submission or ground and pound here, and it didn't happen. But to be fair, you can't finish every single fight too, especially when you're going up in rankings. So maybe that was a bad way thinking about this fight coming in. And then finally, the one thing I will say is he was starting to get have more and more control over this fight in the second into the third. So had this been a 5-round fight, I think we kind of would have saw that. And then we talk about Fluffy as a championship fighter. Well, pretty soon all of his fights will be 5-round fights. So then he'll get the opportunity to showcase it. I think he could have showcased what we wanted to see, whether that be more dominating ground and pound or finding that submission. He just needed 2 more rounds and they weren't available in this fight. But overall, I still think it was a pretty good fight overall for him. Pretty good showing, even though maybe could have been seen as a little bit boring.
I agree with a lot of what you said. I do think Fluffy has the things he needs to work on. Like, he still puts himself in positions to get hurt, whether it be on the feet, he gets hit with big shots, whether it be giving up the transition, put on his back, had to fight off some chokes, had to fight off some ground and pound. It wasn't a perfect performance by any means, but I do want to really emphasize the fact that anytime Anthony Hernandez wins a 3-round fight, he deserves a lot of credit, knowing that rounds 4 and 5 against 95% of the division, he's going to have the advantage in those rounds, especially when he's able to grapple. So, like, in that fight, even though Brendan Allen's a grappler, Hernandez is like pace and cardio in grappling exchanges is nuts. I agree heavily that round 4 and 5 that would have turned. We would have saw more. And in the first 3 rounds, he didn't. Not to say he didn't have any ground and pound. Not to say he didn't attempt any submissions, but he wasn't finding a ton of success with them. It was more of a lack of outcome rather than a lack of attempt. We know that in 4 and 5, he increases the attempts, and in all likelihood, he would have had a little bit more success just purely based on the cardio dynamic at that point. So anytime Hernandez wins a 3-rounder, he deserves a lot of credit. That I believe goes for anybody with great cardio, but he's one of those guys. And I think in this fight, rounds 4 and 5, he would have had a lot of advantages and a lot of opportunities to do damage. And I think we're getting pretty close to a point where he's going to have to be in 5-round fights, unless for some reason the UFC just doesn't like this guy, which doesn't strike me that he is that guy. But maybe if he was on the UFC's bad side, maybe they just decide we're going to stick him on pay-per-views and in 3-round fights consistently. But he's getting to the point just by the guys he's going to be fighting where it either has to be 5 rounds or on a pay-per-view. It's just gotten to that point based on how many fights he's won and how many ranked guys he's beaten, where he sits in these rankings. So I do agree that Hernandez has some flaws, but overall, a quality performance considering these are 2 guys who are good grapplers. One guy looked to be the better grappler, and that was Anthony Hernandez, looked to be the better grappler between 2 grapplers. And it should also be noted, Brendan Allen has been submitting grapplers because he had the run where he submitted Andre Muniz, submitted Paul Craig. So he has been doing good work on the ground in his career and in recent fights. So it's good to see Hernandez, when you pit 2 guys who constantly defeat other grapplers with their grappling, Hernandez was the guy with better grappling. I know that's a lot of dynamics there at one time. but it's still very impressive for Fluffy. Now, moving forward, Anthony, we can swing it over to you first on this one. What do you want to see moving forward for Anthony Hernandez? There's really a lot of options because the names ahead of him, he hasn't really fought any of them. He's only fought a couple guys in these rankings, and there are a lot of unbooked guys. So you've kind of got the whole rankings to your choice practically. So what do you think are some fights that you'd like to see for Fluffy moving forward?
Yeah. I don't know. It's tough. It'd be tough to say Whitaker since I like both of them. I don't know who I'd probably root for. And then there's the Izzy fight, but at this point, like even once again, I'm trying to matchmake for Fluffy, but here I don't know if I want to make Izzy now. Just fight a straight wrestler. Like this dude's done enough. I think he deserves his little striking matches and stuff like that. But I mean that would be another one that would probably favor Fluffy a little bit in some aspects of that wrestling match. But I also think as much as I would want to put him, somewhere in the top 3. Oh my God, Sean Strickland's right there. Let's make that happen. Actually. Because I was gonna say, I think he does need another fight, as that just showed before we start really talking about title eliminators and stuff. I think he should kind of do the path of working his way up, where maybe he's or maybe he's like 2 fights away. So I think even in front of him, of just that Jared Cannonier, Marvin Vettori right in front of him, still a little older guys, but that would make sense. Now there's that Caio Barajo fight, which does intrigue me, but there's a lot of old people, and I don't know if you want to take out a prospect like that. I think you should probably try to keep these two away from each other just for title's sake. But actually, now, yeah, after seeing that name, I think he should maul Sean Strickland. Although Sean Strickland's, takedown defense.
He mauls Sean Strickland.
Yeah.
He gets him out of there. He does him bad on the ground.
But then we should do that right now. Both good high cardio too. I think you could make some angles that fight could get hyped up. But that would be that'd be a fight that I'd be interested. Like you said, he hasn't fought a lot. There's I think multiple directions to go with this. It's just kind of what you want to do with some of the older guys. If Fluffy's path to the title takes precedence over maybe squeezing out a couple more entertaining fights from the older guys.
Yeah, and that's where we're kind of in an issue. Like, I'm looking at these names and like, yeah, I'd be fine with him fighting anybody from Vettori to Imavov. Anyone, I'd be fine with him. I think I'm assuming we're getting Hamzat as the next title challenger. That seems pretty straightforward. And that's where I'm like, okay, so we have that out of the way. Who would fight who? And I'm with you, Anthony. I would love to see the Barallo and Hurt Fluffy fight, but I don't think the UFC wants to get rid of one of their prospects at the moment, while everyone else in the top 10 is kind of aging out a bit. Izzy's been struggling. Whitaker's been struggling recently. So those two names are ones I wouldn't mind seeing, but at the same time, I would love to see the rematch of Sean Strickland and Adesanya, because I think Adesanya takes his game up another level there just to get Sean Strickland out. So the Robert Whitaker ones I don't hate. Cannonier Vettori, maybe, but doesn't Vettori have a fight booked?
He's got the lead say. It's a main event.
That's right.
Within the next month or so, within the next handful of fight cards. So that's not months down the road. That's within, the foreseeable future is coming up eventually.
That's not bad. Other one, just because I think it'd be interesting, and we also haven't heard or seen from him for a while, and it'll be going down the rankings, but Paulo Costa. I mean, to take on a legit when he feels like it striker in Costa, who has power, and that goes a long way to seeing how you can do against guys who are stand-up specialists moving forward.
Yeah, I think a lot of this is really tough on Hernandez because I can say a lot of names and go, well, that makes sense for Fluffy. Like, for example, the Adesanya fight. Like, if I'm Fluffy, like, yes, please. Or Strickland or Whitaker. A lot of these guys, like, they make sense for Fluffy. But I'm really curious as to if these guys or the UFC think it makes sense in both directions. For example, if you're Adesanya, do you even sign the contract if the UFC approaches you with Anthony Hernandez? There's a chance he doesn't. And, as much as I wouldn't mind seeing the Strickland fight, for example, we're the UFC, if the UFC decides, hey, let's do Strickland and Adesanya too, which is, also a good matchup in my opinion, that takes 2 names off the board. And if they decide, let's take Whitaker and Brawlho, there's another 2 names off the board. And I'd probably also join you guys in leaning away from the Brawlho Fluffy fight. That's because I don't think we really, there's enough mix of guys who are sliding down rankings and guys who are moving up rankings to where you can kind of match guys accordingly, just purely based off that. So I wouldn't necessarily book 2 rising guys like that against each other, but let's use Jared Cannonier for example as well. Maybe Cannonier signs that contract to fight Hernandez. But what if the UFC says, oh, we'd rather see Cannonier and Paulo Costa? Because that's a fight that I think a lot of people would love to see. So I think he could be in a position, unfortunately, where he kind of gets left out of this round of matchmaking per se, and is stuck fighting like the winner of Delete Say and Vittori. And then from there, you've got, someone coming off a loss above him that he could slide in. So I think it may actually, as much as he probably deserves a nice little step up in competition, I think the politics of how this middleweight division is going to get booked out may not favor him as much as I've supported the guy. I think he's very good. I'd like to see him move up, but just based off, trends of how guys like him get treated, I doubt we're going to see him take the big leap this time around.
The last thing I do want to say too is that I would be even a bit concerned, or part of the danger in him moving up. Not that saying I probably would have him in a lot of those fights, like you said, against Izzy, against Whitaker, but I thought Allen won more exchanges than he should have, or I thought Fluffy lost more exchanges than he should have against someone of Brendan Allen's caliber of striking. And I don't think it's always scary when your best trait of defense is just having a granite chin. And so I think you guys both kind of mentioned earlier, but that is one thing I hope he does improve, is getting some striking defense as we move up here in the ranks. Because someone like Imavov, we continually see loses rounds, but just lands, is even losing rounds against Cannonier, against Izzy in that first round, and then just lands that one, and it's continually cracking people. So we'll see if that Fluffy fight were to happen, and Fluffy could be winning, get the wrestling started early, get these controls in the first round, and then maybe first half of the round it's on the feet, and then he gets hit by that 1-2 or something. So that's just the one thing I would hope he can continue to work on, his striking defense. That is.
Yep, I would agree with you on that, because that is definitely a concern that I share as well. All right. We talked about UFC Seattle for a while, so let's touch up with the rest of this card with some final thoughts. Plenty to pick from, because 7 finishes on the prelims, and we had some pretty high quality main card fights in terms of pure entertainment. Jerry, I believe it is your turn to lead us off. I may be mistaken, but I think it's your turn. What stands out to you from the rest of UFC Seattle?
I'm going to start out with the guy who I talked about on last week's episode, just more curious to see how he did, in Austin Vanderford. Came out there, put on a solid performance, got the TKO finish in the end, and then the guy kind of snapped on him and just started shoving him, and almost got in a full team-on-team brawl in the octagon after, which you just got knocked out. The guy's better than you. Get over yourself. But I thought that was entertaining. And then shout out Ricky Simon, getting it done as one of the bigger underdogs on this card. So fair play to him. And otherwise, it was just fun. It was just a fun prelims. The main cards was entertaining, even if there was only one finish. We saw resurgences in people that didn't necessarily expect. And it was a great card for it having lost as many fights as it had and as many names as it had. It worked out perfectly.
Yeah, I agree. I'll pick up some of those other ones on the prelims right now. Ion Cutelaba actually looked decent. Looked a little I don't know, what would you say, looked more like a vet out there instead of the constant, painting yourself as Hulk and the face-offs, and then going out there and just swinging crazy or pretending to be stunned like he would do. So it was a good little win from him, because that they were exchanging. There was a little bit of a firefight in there a couple times, and then gets it to the ground and finishes with the sub. Touchy-feely, extremely disappointing. Walked into a guillotine, and then Yeah, that was bad. First round too. And I'd say, yeah, Ricky Simone, because he had lost a couple too. That was like kind of a throwback to why he was one of like my favorite, like, I can't call him mid because he was ranked, but favorite like really title challenging fighters. Absolutely starched that man. And then I guess the one on the main card that I'll pick up on a little bit too was that Rob Font, Gene Matsumoto. Was that Matsumoto's first fight?
It was
Or
his first ranked fight. I believe he was 2-0 in the UFC
2-0?
prior to that. So 25 years old, 2-0. Massive step up in competition. Took it on about 2 weeks' notice. So that was the situation heading in there.
I probably did watch that Brad Katona one, but yeah, that I thought that was a pretty fun fight both ways. You know, really picked up in the third too. Rob Font stepped on the gas, but kind of how most Rob Font fights. A lot of the striking was fun. Matsumoto definitely tried to use the wrestling. As we said, Font has a kind of hole in his game there, but pretty back and forth, all close rounds. I want to say I was leaning Matsumoto won that fight, but then Rob Font got the decision, and I was there for that too because I was genuinely kind of rooting for him more. But overall, I thought it was a pretty complete MMA fight where you got to see a lot of both their skills on display. So I'm definitely looking forward to both of their next fights, if anything.
Yeah, so I got a little bit more to add on that one before I start touching on some of these other performances. I really enjoyed that fight. I said this last week, but I was pretty high on Gene Matsumoto coming in. He didn't get the win here, but that was not the type of performance where trying to sell off any stock. He went in there short notice, catch weight against a guy in Rob Font who, I mean, if you spend that long striking with Rob Font, like he's a problem on the feet still. So long term, I still like Matsumoto. Probably not ready for the rankings quite yet. Rob Font also deserves some credit for showing better striking, or excuse me, takedown defense than he had in previous fights. So he deserves some credit for that as well, showing at least progression there. Next fight prior to that on the card, Gene Silva versus Melsik Baghdasaryan. Gene Silva lands the left hook right straight, finishes him with elbows to the body. A lot of people were like, "Oh, Gene Silva, what a nice guy! Didn't even punch him in the head afterwards." Those 12 to 6 elbows to the ribs, guys, I do not think are.
It was a mercy kill.
Those are, yeah, I do not know if that's mercy kill. I think those are broken ribs. That might hurt more. But yeah, violent fighter, calls out Bryce Mitchell in his post-fight interview. I imagine that's a fight that the UFC would be interested in, trying to get one guy some hype. It's an opportunity to get one guy some hype. We'll say that. Also, Gene Silva, we're going to talk about this in a minute, but said he would step in to fight Justin Gaethje in like 2 weeks. So that's present as well. But we'll get into a little bit of that further down the card. Ian Cutelaba as well ended up being one of the guys that I was most impressed with on the whole card. Veteran-like performance. He implements some grappling offense, and not to say he's never grappled before, but like it was a clear part of his game plan, some progression. Fascinating from a guy who just started as the big idiot who would throw the overhands and act wild, and he's still acting wild. He's still doing the fun stuff, but he's implemented some serious stuff to surround that. And slowly, like I'd like to see him fight a ranked fighter next. He's been winning fights pretty consistently while showing improvement. So shout out to Ian Cutelaba. So that's kind of my wrap up for the rest of the card.
I just had one then just to shout out the Alonzo Manyfield, Julius Walker. I think that was Walker's first fight.
Yes.
Pretty good. It was. I mean, what else could you want from a light heavyweight fight between fighters like that? Overall, I mean, it got sloppy towards the end, very sloppy, which some people seem to not care. The UFC didn't seem to care. I think that one fight of the night, which I think
that's
was
crazy, but
blasphemous. Yes, but give or take, on a fight night, that to be the first card or the first fight of the card, like that's what more could you ask for in that way? So I commend them both. That was a good little fight. The bonus should not have went to them, though. I will say that one last time. Yeah.
No, I just want to bounce off of like the Kubaleta. Oh wow, words are difficult right now. You know who I'm talking about, against Ibo Aslan. And when I talked last week, Aslan was on a 6-fight knockout streak. he's been killing people. He's been mowing people down, but I think his weakness is obviously ground game and submissions. His only 2 losses in MMA have been submissions. So props to Kudaleba for finding a weakness and taking advantage of it, even if he's not the best wrestler in the world by any means.
Yep. All right, let's head over to UFC Vegas 102. In the main event, we have Manel Kape and Asu Almabayev. This one's a pretty important fight for the featherweight division. Manel Kape is as red hot as arguably anybody in the division. Asu Almabayev's on a 16-fight winning streak, 4-0 in the UFC, so he is a red hot prospect. This was originally supposed to be Royval against Manel Kape. Royval was forced to pull out. Almabayev is the replacement. I don't remember the exact date. Sorry for that. But he does have a decent amount of time. This isn't, 3 days. This isn't a week, 2 weeks. I believe he's sitting at least around a month. So decent chunk of time to prepare. Obviously not a full training camp, but he's not coming off the couch 20 pounds over the weight limit trying to get in there and compete. He's will be in better condition. Jerry, I know you let us off last time, but I also know you love Asu Almabayev, or at least have mentioned him multiple times on the podcast. So I will let you lead us off here for what's a pretty big fight for him.
Also, this has got to be his biggest test so far. I mean, Mateus Nicolau, not a bad fighter by any means. He was higher up in the rankings at times, now retired. But my question is, I was so excited for the Brandon Royval and Manel Kape fight that this is one that I'm like, okay, let's see what he can really do. Asu Almabayev. Kape is as dangerous as they come when he can fight. I'm still not going to say anything about that because we still have, we're recording on Wednesday. We still have 3 days till they walk in the octagon with Manel Kape. Anything is possible. So just knocking on wood there, hoping for the best. But I also like it because he was meant to fight Steve Erceg, I think, a week later or 2 weeks later, at some point in March. So that would have been interesting as well. And I guess they just moved that stuff around. It might have even been on the same card. They just bumped him up to the main event. But besides the point, I'm curious to see how his grappling game does because he is one of those guys who is not the most exciting at times. It's just one that I kind of found out, and had been in some entertaining fights, but he doesn't go and finish people. And this is a guy in Manel Kape who you kind of need to finish. Whereas on the other side of things, Kape has been looking good. Lost the fight to Makayev, but otherwise he's beating some of the same people. And it's interesting. He lost to Mateus Nicolau. Almabayev beat Mateus Nicolau. No, very different points in Nicolau's career for those two fights, but something to think about.
That's the MMA math right there. But
exactly.
But no, you guys know I've always flyweights probably. I kind of just sit back and listen to what you guys say at some of the flyweights. I did watch the Nicolau fight and I thought it was impressive. I didn't think Nicolau's the most impressive fighter in his own right, so it'd be my only thing with that. But I'm excited. Obviously, you've seen Kape enough. Always in the headlines more than fighting. Sometimes it seems, but I think this is a fun little main event for the flyweight division. So I am excited to see who comes out on top. I would probably I don't know what the odds or anything, but I just from my perspective, I assume I'd be leaning Kape. I don't know how favorited he would be, but
yeah, I will pull up the odds here in a second. I know he's the favorite, but I don't know the exact number off the top of my head. I'll get it here in a second. But for the kind of my thoughts here, okay. Minus 235 Manel Kape, plus 180 Asu Almabayev. I think it started a little bit higher on the Kape being a favorite and it's kind of got a little bit of Asu money, brought it down. I think this might end up being a boring fight, unfortunately. Just when I look at Asu Almabayev versus Mateus Nicolau, and it's kind of a timid, like one guy's a striker, one guy's a grappler. We're struggling to commit. Then you look at Mokaev versus Kape, and you can say a lot of the same things. That doesn't mean it has to be like that, but it does provide me with some concern. But, at the end of the day, one of those two styles is going to win out. And we can probably appreciate that more than some people who are just casually watching it from the outside, some of those stylistic differences. With that being said, I think Kape is a hard guy to grapple because of how quick he is. A, with his hands, he can get in and get out, but to B, with his feet, you have to track him down. And he's very athletic, so he has a good sprawl. So if he's hitting his sprawls, then you have to go to your clinch takedowns. But to get to your clinch takedowns, you have to get inside and get to the clinch. It's just not easy if a guy's going to be on his back foot, countering, throwing 1-2s. Asu gets pretty wide with his striking, so I think there'll be chances for Kape to land some big counters. Kape has very underrated power as well. So I never get too overconfident in Kape because you'll be watching this fight and you'll be like, hey, man, do something. Throw a strike for me, please. Like, he's can be one of those guys sometimes, and other times he's lighting dudes up with, a bunch of strikes and around. It's a very unique guy in the output from a fight-to-fight basis. So it's hard to be overconfident in Kape, but I do think he is a better fighter, and I think he's just a hard guy to grapple with all that movement and speed. So I'm leaning Kape, but like Asu lands 3 takedowns here. That might be 3 rounds won because he is very good with his top control time. So now not counting Asu out at all, but that's kind of how I see that main event.
Yeah, and I can honestly see it being one of those similar ways that it could be very similar to the Makayev fight. If he has success in Asu finding the takedowns, Manel Kape's proved in at least that one and some others that he does have the best ability to get back up to his feet. Kind of just rolls around and hopes that the guy loses a grip and he can stand up. So that's my fear there. But otherwise, I mean, should be a somewhat entertaining fight, hopefully. But neither of these guys have much to risk and much to lose in a division that is kind of confusing. This is a good way to put yourself out there and with a good performance and get your name up there, considering that it seems like there are more reports coming out about UFC 316 and Kaya Kara-France fighting Alexander Pantoja there. So this is a big one to kind of get your name up and make a step forward.
I was going to say, too, we were talking about the some of the fight nights maybe scheduled or announced that of what could be coming, where they could be going, Des Moines and stuff. And then I think we said that Seattle card was really good for a fight night card. So this one definitely screams Apex. Then you said if it was Vegas, was a 102 or 104, but that definitely does not shock me now looking at this based off what the Seattle card just was. So.
Yeah, not a great card, but there are some other things to look forward to. Anthony, as much as it may be a chore, anything else that stands out to you on the rest of the card?
I kind of had my one pick, and I was almost just for one name on it, but I mean the other dude is a name in his own right. But Esteban Ribovics, I believe multiple of us, or at least one, gave him fight of the year last year, right? With the
I know
fight.
I did. I don't remember what your guys's were, but that was my pick. So
okay, because I think if anything, I might have chose it could have been it, but I even pivoted and I chose the Jiri fight, just so we didn't have multiple. But yeah, so anyways, he's back in the octagon, first fight since, which is exciting. Especially when arguably your last fight, was fight of the year. So, it'll always be eyes will be on you in your next fight. And then Nasrat Hakparast, I know has his own name, not like the superstar by any means, but had some fights like Jared Gordon, Jamie Malarkey and stuff. But I know some people might like him. So if anything, that's a decent little fight on the why that's. Maybe because they're lightweight and not middleweights, but that should probably be the co-main of this card. But instead, they give it to Cody Brundage and Julian Marquez.
Thanks a lot, Bo Nickel.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's maybe because that's one probably has a for sure knockout on it, ideally. So maybe that's why they have it second. But yeah, that'll be the one fight I'll shout out.
Yeah, I like that Ribovic Haskarat one. Should be very entertaining. Just chaos going forward. The other guys I want to just mention, Danny Barlow, 9-0. He's got 6 finishes. He's been looking good going up against an English guy, and Sam Patterson, who's had his ups and downs as of late and kind of needs to get himself back in the win column continue in the win column after he won his last 2 by first round submission. So that should be one where I don't think we're going to see 15 minutes of that fight. I think it could be very entertaining. Someone's getting finished one way or another. Then I always find it funny when Austin Lane's fighting, just because the ex-NFL players, he's not very good. I expect him to get smacked about by Mario Pinto, who I think is making his UFC debut. I could be wrong in that, but I think he's making his UFC debut. So
he's a contender series signee from last season. He's making his debut.
Yep. So curious to see what he can do as well in there. Otherwise, I'm more excited for Karate Combat on Friday night than UFC on Saturday.
Yeah, so I'd like both of the fights that you guys mentioned. Ribovich and Barlow are both guys I'm relatively high on as prospects. I gave Ribovich fight of the year with Zell Huber, so who am I to say I'm not excited for his next fight? So, Danny Barlow, one of my favorite prospects from his season of Contender Series. He didn't get the nickname left-handed God for no reason. He's earned that one, and you can tell by the way he fights. I will also shout out Charles Johnson and Ramazobek Temirov. I'm pretty good with the names, but Mr. Temirov has a tough first name. I like this fight as well. This should be the main card on the main card, and it's the second fight on the card. You could argue that it should be the co-main. These guys are not ranked flyweights, but like if we were ranking out to 20, they would probably both be ranked. At least Charles Johnson would. Charles Johnson has some good wins on his resume. He's got the win over Josh. What's that?
Isn't he currently ranked 12th? Charles Johnson.
Oh, he might be. I was just looking at the Google here, but
the UFC website has him at 12. But we know how reliable the UFC website is, so I'm not like 100% sure. But.
He is ranked 12th. So on a card with three ranked fighters, one of them is the second fight of the night and not on the main card. Who knows why? And Temirov 1-0 in the UFC, won his first fight by brutal knockout. Has fought in one before, so he's actually got like a respectable regional scene record behind him. Think it's going to be a good fight. So that one should be on the main card. Should be, if I had to order this bout card, I'd, Cody Brundage and Julian Marquez would not be on the main card, and this one would. So don't know if I'd put it in the co-main, but at that point, you're splitting hairs.
That was I was gonna maybe look for one more, and I was gonna say Charles Johnson too. I remember watching his first fight against Muhammad Mokaev, and I thought he did really good. I think it was his first fight, and then he's fought Joshua Van, who we just spoke about, and Suma Darji, and I don't know. He's one of those fighters. I guess now he is ranked, so I can't say it. But I was gonna say Charles Johnson was always a fighter that when he was unranked, buried on the prelims, like he is once again, even with that ranking. It was name that I did not mind always watching one of his fights. Like if his fight was on, I'd be like, okay, well, I got 15 minutes to watch.
Mm-hmm. I should also quick shout out Haider Emil, who making I think his third UFC fight against William Gomis. Gomis is the most boring fighter in the UFC potentially. Haider Emil throws punches until someone gets knocked out. He literally ended his last fight with like a 40-piece combination, or I don't even think it's a combination at that point. I think you're just throwing at that point, but he's an all-action guy versus a teep and run guy. So what a clash of styles. I don't know if that makes for a fun fight or a bad fight, but just be aware it's there for anyone watching. So
yeah, that was actually the one I was going to bring up as well just now, but because Gomis at least he's got 2 split decisions, another decision, and he don't somehow finish somebody. But it's one of those things that his fights tend to be pretty close, either because he doesn't do anything and runs around and the other guy can't catch up to him. But this is one where Haider might just go after him, and it might make for a pretty entertaining fight if Gomi actually has to fight and not teep and run.
Yeah. William Gomis has a stoppage in the UFC because he fought Giannis Gomori, who Peyton Talbot famously knocked out in, I believe, like 9 seconds.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So, yeah, took William Gomis 2 minutes and 20 seconds into the third round to get the guy that Talbot got out of there in 9 seconds. So,
and he didn't even mean to knock him out.
Yeah, and he didn't mean to knock him out, and B, Gomis is a featherweight, Talbot's a bantamweight. So it's like he's fighting a bantamweight. It took him 3 rounds. So that guy, I guess he doesn't suck, but like it sucks to watch. So
Keep finding ways to win. What is he, 4-0 in the UFC now?
Yeah, right. He's gonna fuck around and get cut while being undefeated if he doesn't get his shit together. All right, let's hit on some of these news pieces real quick. The biggest one was that Dan Hooker pulled out of his bout with Justin Gaethje. Pretty serious handbrake. He showed, I believe, one picture on the news, one picture on Twitter, Instagram, or whatever it was. Hand's pretty swole up. It's like, it's a broken hand. Probably made the right call. I wouldn't want to fight Justin Gaethje at all, but I certainly want to do it. Wouldn't want to do it with one hand, knowing the type of fight that was going to be. Probably a good call by Dan Hooker. Now that Dan Hooker is out of the fight, there are some guys who could potentially step in there. As far as the guys who are kind of asking for that fight, it sounds like Gamrot is publicly calling for it, and it sounds like Gene Silva is publicly calling for it. Sounds like, Alto Renato Moicano publicly calling for it. Sounds like behind the scenes, Beneil Dariush and Rafael Fiziev are some other options that are being looked at. Do any of those names stick out to you, or are there other ones that you would like to see? Jerry, we can swing it over to you first.
I like most of those names. Gamrot, I'm concerned about because I saw some report that or some interview he said to someone today that he's at 178 pounds at the moment, and cutting that much weight in this short of time, I don't know if it's. I'm sure it's doable for him, but I don't know what kind of state he would be in if he does get down. So I'm a little less so on that one just because of that. I love the Renato Moicano fight. Why not? He just showed up and fought the number one guy in the world on one day's notice. Maybe he deserves to get a fight with a guy like Justin Gaethje, get some more pay-per-view points, and do all that stuff. Also, he's just showing that he's willing to fight anybody, anywhere. Also, the Jean Silva one. We saw what he did again this weekend. Seems like he's a guy who's going to just go into the octagon, throw hands. Hopefully he lands and knocks the other guy out, which he's been doing so far. If he does that with Justin Gaethje, I know he's moving up a division and fighting one of the tough guys, but we saw what Max Holloway did. I'm not saying it's necessarily a guarantee because Jean Silva is not Max Holloway, but it could be a pretty entertaining scrap with two guys just going at each other. At the end of the day, that's all I want. I wouldn't mind like BSD. I don't know if he has a fight booked or if he's even. I haven't seen his name even rumored. That's the only one that you didn't mention at all. That I'm like maybe, but also he's ranked 15. So
the Benoit Saint Denis rumor. I don't know if it's signed, but the rumor is currently Joel Alvarez, who you could throw him right in there as well with another guy who could maybe make that fight.
Yeah. So yeah, Moicano or Silva is my pick.
I liked. I mean, I don't know when the last time Gamrot has fight, but I understand that call. Moicano, the only thing I would say is like he just did accept a late or short notice fight, so like kind of another one would be tough. But I mean, if he is down, and I get the whole thing, that would. I mean, the fighter that I think he is, I think that's the best way to maybe make some money is build up that, especially after a loss, kind of. Maybe people will credit you again for being the I'll fight anywhere, anytime, anybody type person, and that fits with his brand that he's going for too and stuff. So I like that. My first instinct was someone like Dariush was my first actual because then he just had a fight scrapped, right?
Yeah, he was supposed to fight Moicano.
Okay, and then so that was where my mind went to first. Although Gaethje, I mean, that could be a tough little task, but I mean, you get the shot at the third guy right there. I guess you can't turn it down, especially he's old. I don't know how many wins he's got left or fights he has left. And then, I mean, it was intriguing when you said at first that Gene Silva, talk about a huge jump in competition. But, Gaethje maybe is, out of his prime. So if you can catch the name while the name's still hot, and obviously Gaethje is still a stud, but if he is really that good, that would be a good little jump to make and put you right there in title contention after that win. So also it could be a little dangerous though. That like I said, that's a big jump, and Gaethje is no joke. So that could turn into the Poirier BSD thing a little bit, where eyes were a little too big. But I think like Jerry said, any of those names I'm interested in, leaning more at Dariush or even a Gene Silva than other ones, but overall it's a Gaethje fight, so put him in with anybody, and I think we should see some entertainment.
Yeah, the last part of that is kind of my whole opinion. Like, it's Justin Gaethje. Can he please stay on the card? Just please keep him on the card. I will say, just Gene Silver's performance, not against Baghdasaryan, I could I shouldn't say I could care less, but his performance against Drew Dober up at lightweight was bananas. I think he became the first person to finish Drew Dober. Like, he went physicality for physicality with Drew Dober and won. Like, that's not supposed to happen if you're a lightweight. So I think not a move up permanently, but like one-offs at lightweight. I don't think it's a terrible idea for Gene Silva, but I just think you can just put him in there with Bryce Mitchell and people will be just drooling over that one. And I don't blame people at all, but like that one seems a tough one to risk. So we can throw him in there with Gaethje when you've got all these other guys, whether it be Gamrot, Fiziev, Dariush. Like, I like a lot of these fights. So I don't really have a solid opinion. If you forced me to pick, I would probably go Gamrot because it may not be the most entertaining fight, but I think it gives Gaethje the most with the win, if that makes sense. Like, I think if he goes out there and knocks out Gamrot, for example, I think that does his stock a little bit better than if he goes and gets Moicano. So that's kind of where my thought process is there. But, I'm not really too picky. And, if they threw in Dariush or they threw in Moicano or Silva or whoever it may be, I'm not going to get upset and think it's a bad fight. A sneaky one I will throw out there that I just kind of popped in my head is Brian Ortega. He was talking about moving up to lightweight a while ago. He's a 145er, so maybe he's kind of been preparing for that move and the cut wouldn't be as bad. And maybe Brian Ortega just decides I'll get in there on short notice and fight Justin Gaethje. He may get knocked out cold.
Yeah, what did Ortega do to you?
I don't know why that just came to my mind, but like that one may be maybe one they consider considering. Hey man, you want to fight at 155? Here's Gaethje. Figure out if you can do it. So it's just another one I kind of thought of. I didn't really think it through, but he probably does get killed. But like, I've seen Justin Gaethje get choked out a couple times. So I'm just saying.
I do have one other that I kind of just crossed my mind just because he's on the card already, and if they wanted to just make it easy, if they couldn't find someone who wanted to actually step in the end, seems like they have plenty of shooters. But Jalen Turner, I know he's lost to Moicano, Dan Hooker, and Gamrot recently in 3 of his last 4 fights, but he's already on there. I have a feeling it'd be an entertaining fight, just like worst case scenario. I'd rather watch that than him fight guys Ignacio Bahamondes. So.
That was my first thought too when I was first looking at the rankings, but I thought maybe a little too low in the rankings. Also, I think Jalen Turner might get hurt in that fight.
I think Justin Gaethje might get hurt in that fight.
Really? So,
actually, they both might get hurt.
I mean, that's why I like the idea of that fight. Because
I mean, look at what happened when Turner fought Dan Hooker.
Yeah,
that was a banger, and it may look like the Hooker fight where, Turner lands some big shots, and all of a sudden you see him take a couple deep breaths, and Gaethje starts landing left hook, right hook, and it doesn't go too well for Turner. But I think that's probably the most compelling matchup there for me, honestly.
The only other thing, though, is I like Bahamondes as a fighter, too. So I was actually just super excited with the Turner-Bahamondes matchup. Mm-hmm. Was one of the other things about that, too.
Bahamondes, shout out to him for taking out Manuel Torres, the leader of the frauds. People talk about getting fraud checked. Manuel Torres getting knocked out by Ignacio Bahamondes. That one was up there for me. Last one I'll throw out there. Is there any chance Charles Oliveira gets on his shrouding white horse who gets in the octagon next weekend? Any chance? If you say no, I completely understand. Is there any chance?
I was looking at that and I was like, oh, I'm not opposed to that. And I mean, I don't hear too much talks of him getting a fight booked with Aiemann or anything at the moment. So maybe he's ready to go. I sign me up for that if that's an option even.
I guess if the point was to save the card and just substitute an absolute banger on the card all of a sudden, then yeah, I'd be there for that. But I don't know. I don't know if that's help. I mean, it's beating Gaethje is not going to not help your title contender chase. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess that is true if you beat him. So I mean, there's a chance he is Dubrox. He's gonna start rematching everybody. He's got to do his he went through death row to get his first title, and now he has to do it again. But they're all a little less. They're all a little worse this time.
Yeah. I will say it feels like he's gonna get hot by Topuria in the title picture, and if you want to prevent that from happening, that's one way to do it. But
That is true.
I think it's unlikely. I'm kind of more trying to stir the pot than anything. If I'm being honest.
Topuria moves up on short notice to fight Justin Gaethje. Welcome to the lightweight division.
Yeah,
that'd be nuts. Forever the GOAT if he does that.
I'd start saying the GOAT. I'd start saying the GOAT word if he did that.
Fishes him off.
It's like love bombing, but I'd start G bombing him. I'd start saying GOAT.
Yeah,
that'd be a hell of a fight as well, though, as we've talked about numerous times. So
yeah, it would. What a way to come back from the worst knockout of your career. Hey man, you get to fight Ilia Topuria now.
Last time we saw that happen to was Volkanovski, and we saw how that
worked.
Yeah, he still hasn't fought.
Yeah.
All right, let's quickly touch on some of these other fights here that were booked. We have UFC Des Moines, Iowa. Yes, the UFC is going to Des Moines, and it's getting a fire main event. Cory Sandhagen, Deiveson Figueiredo. Jerry, it's your turn to lead us off. What did you make of this matchup in the bantamweight division?
Fine by me. You can give me any Cory Sandhagen against virtually anyone that will somewhat stand and try and strike with him at times. Deiveson Figueiredo, obviously damn good on the ground as well. But he's one of those guys who's probably going to just keep going forward. And it's going to be interesting. This is one I can kind of see a flying knee from Cory Sandhagen coming with the height difference. Similar to what was it? Was that against Cheeto where he had it? Or who was that again?
Frankie Edgar. The ghost of Frankie Edgar for being.
Yeah. I could see something like that happen. And honestly, fine by me. I would love this one's just going to be entertaining. And I have a feeling we're kind of shitting on the fact that it was in Des Moines earlier on, I think before we started the show, but they're a wrestling fan base in Iowa. They're a Big Ten country, so they like their wrestling, like their fighting, and I have a feeling that crowd is going to be all jacked up on as many bush lights as a human can physically handle. So I'm excited for that card just in general to see the crowd.
I wasn't hating on Des Moines before we get people mad. I just think Sacramento should personally probably have a fight card before Des Moines, but I like the fact that they're going places and it's not all Apex. But my quick things is Figgy was on that little win streak, 3 fights. I saw he beat Cheeto and Rob Font, which is funny enough. Sandhagen actually for his last couple wins has wins over the same amount of people. So I think it's a good little matchup, and I think it's a winnable one for Cory to where he's not fighting someone named Jan Umar he hasn't fought Merab yet, but yeah. So I think hopefully build him up again. I would just love to see him fight for the title once, please God. But I think this is a good little matchup between 4 and 5, and hopefully definitely should be entertaining. I mean, most Sandhagen fights are, if not an absolute like firefight, they're still technically very entertaining.
Yeah.
I will say just briefly before you go, James, does this take off? Does this mean O'Malley's fighting for the belt, do you think? Because I was wondering that. I think we've talked about that. Like that's the easiest fight in this division to make is Sean O'Malley and Cory Sandhagen, 2 lengthy strikers. Now Cory Sandhagen's fighting someone. So just in the back of my mind, just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, I'm very curious as well because, I mean, you could also say, does it mean he's fighting doing the Piotr Jan rematch? I think that's a possibility as well. If that happens, that better be 5 rounds, but that's a whole nother discussion. That's the weird part about it for me. I love this fight, right? Don't get it twisted, but I just think it's a little bit like, man, everybody wants to see Sandhagen and O'Malley. That's the only thing that I'm kind of like not thrilled about, but like, I mean, if you come to me and say, hey, should we book Sandhagen and Figgy? Like, who am I to say no? Like, those are 2 entertaining fighters, great fighters, interesting stylistic clash. I think it's a really good fight from that perspective. I wonder if maybe Song Yadong backdoors his way into an O'Malley fight by this one getting booked, and if they give the title shot to Piotr first, does Song suddenly becomes the highest ranked guy outside of Umar with the fight book, maybe he backdoors his way into Sean, and that's an entertaining fight as well. So I think there's some ways that this division could go as far as matchmaking goes, but I think this is a good matchup when you're, trying to get both these guys in the octagon. Can't say no to getting either of these guys fight. So I will say, if the Brazilian with a red stripe in his hair goes out there and shoots a ghillie in Des Moines, Iowa, that wrestling fan base might just you'd think it was witchcraft. They might lose their mind out there. But I think it's going to be a great fight, and I have no reservations. And hell, I might even make the trip to Des Moines. It's not too far of a drive for me, so I may go out there. I got to get to a fight eventually, and shit, if they don't come to Detroit, I'm gonna have to go to them eventually. Is what it sounded like. So that may be the path for me, but that's kind of what I think about the main event. Is that I'm thinking about going. So hold it in high regards. All right, last fight we'll quickly touch on. Jose Aldo has a fight for UFC 315. They're sending him back to Canada. Why? I don't know why. I don't know why he needs to go back to Canada. He's fighting Aiemann Zahabi in Canada. Why is he fighting Aiemann Zahabi? I don't know. Anthony, I think it's your turn to lead us off. What do you make of Jose Aldo versus Aiemann Zahabi in Canada?
Is Zahabi Canadian?
Yep, it's from Montreal.
So, we did say that earlier. Yeah, because I was gonna say, wasn't it last Canada card? All the men went like 0-7 on it.
Yeah.
So maybe that's good for Aldo. But yeah, I mean, you could have said pick 25 people that you'd rather match Aldo up, and I'm pretty sure I could have came up with 25 other names. But once again, like we always say, if Aldo's fighting, I'll watch and stuff like that. At least it is on a pay-per-view too, I guess. But I don't know. The UFC has an issue with Aldo for some reason, and they should really work that out, because it's just hurting fight fans' hearts watching Aldo get these extremely weird matchups and stuff. But hopefully it's a good fight, and I'd assume it's pretty winnable. To be fair, I think I said I watched his last fight, but I mean, we'll see. We'll see what happens. Come that fight. You said it was what was it? 315.
Yeah.
315.
The Canada card.
It's in May though, so yeah, we'll see though.
I will say I'm just happy that he's not fighting in Salt Lake City.
Yeah.
He hasn't fought in Canada in a long time, and when he did, that was Calgary, which is a higher elevation back in 2018. So very different fighter now. Montreal is almost sea level. It's definitely lower down, so hopefully the elevation isn't going to have too much of an impact. But there's a Jose Aldo fighting. You could have Jose Aldo fighting, a punching bag. That like one of those inflatable dummies that goes up and down. I would tune in, even if it was in a Walmart parking lot. Jose Aldo is Jose Aldo. Well, that's why I think it doesn't matter who they put it up against. I'm just hoping that he doesn't. That this isn't it as far as how he goes out.
Yeah. I think I'd rather see that image you just painted of Aldo fighting the inflatable punching bag in the Walmart parking lot. I think that'd at least be funny.
Yeah.
I'm half kidding, but this isn't the match I would have booked either. To me, I just think there are a lot of more compelling fights you can make. I do think it is tough to match up Aldo just based on the fact that he's fought a lot of these guys. For example, he's fought Cheeto and Rob Font. So like that makes it a little bit tougher, but like it's kind of the time frame's a little wonky with Cejudo just fighting, but I would have liked to see, a Cejudo Aldo. I think Aldo Kyler Phillips is a better fight, and somehow we've gotten to this point in the bantamweight division where the bottom of the rankings are Aiemann Zahabi, Marcus McGee, and Montel Jackson, and it's kind of it's kind of the worst it's been in a minute in terms of like exciting strikers down there. Usually you have a couple of exciting strikers. Not that these guys are bad. I think they're talented, but I just don't think any of those matchups with Aldo are jumping off the page. So it is a little bit harder to match make somebody, but I probably would have tried to find something else before giving him Zahabi, but maybe he goes out there against Zahabi, wins, and then starts moving up in the rankings. Who knows? But I wouldn't say it would be my, first thought for a matchup. All right. Thank you to everyone for tuning in, listening to us talk fights, talk potential replacements, talk matches that were made. We appreciate it. We will be back next week talking. That's a pay-per-view preview next week. Alex Pereira versus Magomed Ankalaev in the main event. Co-main event to be determined. Hopefully, Justin Gaethje is one of the fighters involved. And we probably won't do anything recap-wise from UFC Vegas 102, considering it's a pay-per-view and UFC Vegas 102 kind of sucks. Regardless, there will be a preview for UFC Vegas 102 if you want more in-depth thoughts on the card and everyone's picks, regardless of whether it's a good fight or a bad fight. We will have picks. I will try to have best bets, but there's been a couple times in recent weeks where I've tried to come up with best bets and I find one bet and go, well, I guess there's no article because I'm not going to start throwing out there bets that are shit. So at least on purpose, I might do it accidentally. I won't purposely give out shit bets, but FanDuel, DraftKings, whatever sports book you want to use, willing, there will be a betting article as well this week. So, thank you to everyone for tuning in. Like, subscribe, and go check out Vendetta Sports Media for those written articles. And we will see you next week.